Okay, what was I gonna say?
I don't know what you were gonna say.
Okay, hi, welcome back to my channel, and if you're new, my name's Emma, and this is Rylan. He is my fiance slash baby daddy, and today we're gonna give the full detailed birth story version of Avery's birthday, like her actual day that she was birthed.
Can you say that sentence again?
We're gonna go into the full story version of the day Avery was born. Is that acceptable?
Yeah.
And this is kind of like in celebration of her turning 1 year old in a week. We have notes on our phone so that we don't forget anything, because there is a lot to this story, I feel like. We tried to film this once already and we went like back and forth and zigzagged on the timeline, and it was very, very confusing and chaotic. Like the day was, but like you can't follow along like that. So June 29th, 2020, I had been like leaking this weird fluid. I like contacted my midwives and they told me to come into their like office, and they tested the fluid and it wasn't amniotic fluid.
Did they find out what it was?
No, I don't. Maybe I was just peeing myself a little bit every day. And then I was asking my midwife if she could check how dilated I was, but then they were really busy and I felt too awkward to ask her, so I just left, didn't check how dilated I was. Probably should have in hindsight, but we survived. After that, we were kind of like excited that it was gonna be labor, so we were trying not to get our hopes up until like we knew for sure it was the real deal. So that same day, I went and hung out with like Rylan's mom, and she was like leaving for the week or something. She was out of town and she wasn't back for a couple days, so she was like, that baby better not come out while I'm gone. So sure enough, next day, June 30th, is Avery's birthday.
You got something that maybe goes better at the start of the video. You remember, like, it was only a couple weeks before you had Avery that your cousin mentioned to you, just so you know, like, all the women in our family have the baby a week early, and you were expecting maybe a couple days early, but you were also worried about a couple days late. And if she didn't warn you, because Avery was 1 week before her.
No. You're remembering this part. I remember this part properly. So her original due date was July 9th. Most times, like first time babies are actually born a few days late past their due date. So I was expecting Avery to be like a little bit late. And then, yeah, one of my cousins messaged me and said all the women in our family usually give birth like early, like a week early or so like kind of be prepared for that. So then I kind of had that in the back of my head, hence why I was kind of excited on the 29th. I was like, maybe this is labor. So I wake up on June 30th in the morning at around like 7 a.m. Nothing out of the ordinary for me. I woke up early all the time, but I was having like really bad pelvic pain, but that was like really common for me at the last few weeks of my pregnancy. I had like a lot of like lower back pain and pelvis pain, so I didn't really think anything too much of it. I just thought I was just like had slept weird or something like that, but it like was like pretty discomfortable at that point, and I felt like being such a baby. Rylan had offered to like take the day off of work to take care of me, and at that point I was like, that's so stupid and dramatic. Like, I don't need you to take care of me, I'm fine, it's just back pain. But then it kept getting like a little bit worse, and I was like, okay, like take a half day off. I was like, we compromise. It's like the full day seems ridiculous, like go back after lunch. But he worked from home, by the way, to make this story a little bit maybe make more sense. He worked from home, so it's no biggie to like just like hop on his computer after lunch. All morning I kind of felt like I had to poop too. Like, I remember going to the bathroom like so many times being like, I just feel this kind of like urge to push, but like I didn't have to poop, so I was like, oh, I must just be coming in a little bit, like whatever.
Yeah, you kept going to the bathroom like I was still sleeping. You just kept getting out of bed.
Oh, and then I took a Tylenol because Rylan like convinced me to take a Tylenol because like I was in a decent amount of pain, and I didn't take Tylenol that often. And then I also took some Gravel, I remember, because I think I was feeling a little bit nauseous from the pain. So keep in mind, that's the only medication I took that whole entire day. Also, Avery was a very active baby in the womb. Like, she kicked me and moved constantly. So she was always stimulating Braxton Hicks contractions, which are like practice contractions basically that your body does. They're like really, really weak in comparison to real contractions. So Avery was like really active, like nothing super out of the ordinary. And I'd heard before that if babies are super active, they're not coming soon. Usually they aren't really active like right before they're born. Anyway, so she was moving around a lot. So usually when baby moves, it like can stimulate Braxton Hicks contractions, and I had a lot of those near the end. So I was like, this is totally normal, nothing crazy. And then it was around 10:30, you said.
I mean, yeah, caught up to kind of where I was. Emma was just acting weird all morning. So I woke up and I was like, I feel like I need to take the day off work out. She convinced me to do a half day, so I messaged work and said I will be back just afternoon, after lunchtime.
Did you just think I was actually being weird, or were you already like,
I thought you were, no, because I was on the same page as you, was not wanting to get too excited about labor because of the day before. And I can't look at the camera. I for some reason need to look away like when I think of things. Oh man, it's weird. I'm making eye contact with myself.
Just look at the lens.
Oh god. Okay, so I was on the same page, not wanting to get too excited about labor, so I was trying to talk myself out of it. But around 10:30, I started getting suspicious because the timing, the Braxton Hicks, whenever Emma was experiencing it, was they didn't have that kind of timing. It was usually one and done, and it would be like triggered by different things. But these were like rhythmic, so I started timing them without telling Emma, and this went on for like half an hour. Because what is it supposed to be like? What are the numbers?
It's the 4-1-1 rule. So it has to be 4 minutes apart. The contractions have to last for a minute, and that whole like cycle has to be going on for 1 hour before you even call your doctor or midwife or healthcare professional. Keep in mind, like midwives are like, you have so much time before you need to call us and get to the hospital, like literal hours.
So for half an hour, it was like every 5 minutes, and they were lasting like 45 seconds. So I felt like that was pretty close to 4-1. So I told them, I was like, hey, just so you know, I've actually been timing your Braxton Hicks, and they're actually contractions, I'm pretty sure.
You're still super nonchalant about it. I remember you being like, these are kind of rhythmic. And I was like, oh, yeah, you're right. And then you're like, I've actually been timing them, and this is the like thing. I was like, whoa, what? Right around when you had told me that you'd been timing me secretly, that's when it started to get like really intense all of a sudden. Like it just picked up out of nowhere. Contractions got like even more frequent. You kept like timing them, and they were getting like more intense to the point where like I wasn't really like conscious and like aware of my surroundings during the contractions.
Yeah, I don't think you were initially really convinced when I told you about the timing. You were still kind of like, I don't know, like I don't want to be dramatic. And then suddenly, like within like 60 seconds, you were like on your hands and knees.
Yeah, no, it was so fast. So then even though like technically we hadn't hit the 4-1-1 yet, I was like, this is intense. I think we need to call the midwife. You call the midwife, and
yeah, I told her about the rhythmic, and because it wasn't 4-1-1, she wasn't gonna come back, but you were worryingly hot. You got like really warm all of a sudden. I took your temperature, and then she would call back in an hour. Oh no, okay. So you're getting worryingly hot. So when we talked to the midwife, she said, take your temperature again in 30 minutes, and if it has gone up, yeah, so we called the midwife again before the 30 minutes of taking her temperature again. And the midwife was like, oh, like, is her temperature rising really fast? Is she too hot? I was like, no, she told me she needs to push. And the midwife says to me, lay down some blankets and lay Emma on her side. And suddenly I was like, that was when it really hit me, because I remember like the week before, there was these pamphlets, there was their documents we were reading.
Yeah, so the midwives, I was like, I feel like you guys haven't given me enough information. I'm like an Uber preparer, so I'm like, can you give me all the information, PDFs, everything you possibly can, birth classes to like watch and stuff. So the week before, I was like, Rylan, read all this stuff. I want you to be educated. And I was like, he was like, oh, we don't really need to read this one. This one's like an emergency case. That's not going to be us. And I was like, I guess we should probably read it just in case.
So we read this one that says, if you go into labor before you can get to a hospital, one of the things to do, you lay down blankets to make mom comfortable, lay her on her left side to slow down labor. And so when the midwife said lay her down on her side, I was like, oh, this is real stuff. Like, we're going too fast. And then from there, I was like, so I was starting to get Emma prepared for that. And the midwife said, I will stay on the phone with you until I get there.
I remember the look on your face when all of a sudden she was like, get towels, like get Emma on her side. And then Rylan, I just remember watching him like going back and forth around the house, trying to grab all the towels and like trying to make sure I'm okay. And he's like on the phone with the midwife, and he's like got his authoritative voice on, going like, yep, okay, yep.
Yep.
But I remember like the contractions at that point were so intense that like I was literally groaning from the pain. That was so weird. I've never made that noise before in my life, and I haven't since. I could not stop myself, and for some reason it just like felt like it did something and like helped. Yeah, I remember the midwife stayed on the phone with us, and that was like the longest phone call / drive for her to get to us in my life. Like, that felt so long. And I remember every like 2 minutes I kept asking, I was like, how much longer? Like, it was like a kid on a road trip. I would be like, how much longer? She's like, oh, about like 10 minutes. I'd be like, how much longer? She'd be like, oh, about 10 minutes. So I was like, what?
Yeah, I think she did say 10 minutes twice because she got stuck in traffic.
Side note, that wasn't even our midwife. So we had 4 midwives on one team. That was like our team of midwives that we've been working with the whole entire pregnancy. All those midwives are busy because 5 other babies decided to be born that day in the mornings. Midwives from the backup team are also busy. So this is the midwife from the backup team. That's how backed up they were.
Yeah, so the midwife showed up. She was like, okay, I'm parked out front. So I texted our landlord to be like, hey, don't let the dog out because the gate will probably be open. We're gonna have midwives coming and going right now.
I remember her, like, we lived in a basement suite at the time, and I remember just hearing her legs bolt down those stairs so fast and like barge into our house like no other. I remember the first thing she does is she goes and like checks to see how dilated I was, and I don't remember, I didn't feel anything. She was like, yeah, you're fully dilated. And I just like dead looked at her and what the and then I was like, pardon my language, so polite about it. I was not expecting to be that dilated.
Yeah, we were trying to guess, like, oh, maybe it's like already 3 or 4.
No, I thought it was gonna be like 6, which was gonna be like crazy. That was one of the most shocking things I've ever heard in my life.
Which said, so here are your 2 options. You can either have the baby here at home, or you can try to go to the hospital and probably have a baby in the car.
So we're like, I guess we're having a baby at home. And I remember just like crying to her, being like, I don't want to have a baby at home. I have white bed sheets and towels.
Well, and yeah, you also said like, I want to be in a hospital. And she said, if we go to the hospital, you need to hold it. You're like, no, okay, we're having a baby at home.
Yeah, I remember that. I was like, oh yeah. She's like, you have to hold it for the whole car
Like,
ride.
you're not allowed to
like,
push.
I was like, ooh, yeah, I've already felt like I needed to push for like the last, what seems like 3 hours, which was actually 15 minutes for you to drive here. I'm like, I'm not lasting a whole ride to the hospital because we lived like 20 minutes from the hospital. So we decided to have a home birth, and then they're telling me to like relax and stuff, and that's when they apparently just set up a whole hospital room in our apartment.
This is the second midwife that showed up actually from our team?
Yes, she was. So she finished at a different birth and like rushed over to us. So we had 2 midwives there.
Yeah, so they just started unpacking. They had like a couple of like normal, like look like school backpacks.
Duffel bags kind of things.
But they just exploded across.
They just like
house.
pulled it out like in all these different ways and like took over our whole bedroom and like our whole living room. Like it was a literal hospital just in our apartment. Yeah, and then they kept asking for more towels, and you gave them my like really nice white like guest towels, and then they looked at you and they were like, yeah, we're not using those. And then I felt like a little bit more trust in them. I was like, okay, they know what they're doing. But they made themselves right at home. Like they were not shy whatsoever. They like just rummaged around our kitchen to like get garbage bags and like threw a bunch of towels in the dryer, and they like got Tupperware, which you'll find out what they use the Tupperware for later. At that point, my water is still fully intact. So they were like, they wanted me to go on the toilet to break my water because just the way, was it the way you're sitting that like...
My understanding was that you usually relax your pelvis when you sit on the toilet out of like muscle memory.
Oh, yes. Yeah, so obviously at this point, my memory is like super blurry, so like I'm relying on Rylan for a lot of this. I already made him like write down a lot of these notes. Water.
Oh yeah, this is when I knew you actually blacked out. The bathroom was a bit of a mess. We hadn't fully cleaned up the house, so I started cleaning up the bathroom, wiping the counter, and Emma looks at me and she's like, I don't care if it's clean, like just be here and support me. And I was like, whoa, Emma likes it clean. Like even
that's how you relieve my stress.
To this day, if Emma's in a bad mood, I don't go and console her, I go and clean the kitchen because that's what she needs, right? And so like in that moment, I was like, oh man, Emma has left the building. This is just a woman giving birth. They like wanted to wait and see if my water was gonna break on its own before they broke it, but like it was like, okay, I'm fully dilated, my water needs to break, it's like next step kind of thing. So you're sitting on the toilet like this, and I'm standing in front, we have our hands on each other's shoulders, and she's like going through contractions, like making all the moans and groans, and I got a phone call from a private number. I still to this day don't know why, but I answered it. You're just so hyped, and when I was just like in the zone, and like so you don't process anything. You just like, what do I need to do? And if a phone's ringing, you think I need to answer it. And so I pick up the phone. I hear our landlord's voice, and he says, "Is the baby born yet?" And I said, "No." Then Emma goes through a contraction, and he's like, "Are you sure?" Like I thought I heard a baby crying. I'm like, "No, that's Emma." And then I'm like, do you need something? And he's like, I don't remember giving you permission to do a home birth. And I was like, we never asked permission to do a home birth. Like, this is a medical emergency. And then the midwife walks in. She's like, who is that? I'm like, it's our landlord. He's asking us why we're doing a home birth. And she's like, give me the phone. She takes the phone and she starts losing.
I remember I came out of my blackout for a moment there because I remember her yelling and being like, we have all the proper medical, like, blah, 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 to keep it clean. Like, she was like, we're medically trained. But no, you forgot. He tried to send his wife down because she was a labor and delivery nurse or like lactation consultant nurse. I don't know. Something.
Because like we told him the midwives had made the decision. Like she was fully dilated. Like we didn't have the time to go to a hospital, and he wanted his wife, who was the labor and delivery nurse, to come down and make her own decision. We're getting into a real gray area of legality with some of the things he actually was requesting. Like the midwife was not happy.
She was like, that is medical information.
Yeah, so she just yelled at him for a while, and then they hung up, and she was like, if he calls back, just hand the phone.
She was so pumped up when she came back in, though. She was like, if he calls back, you hand the phone straight to me. Don't even talk to him. I will deal with it.
And that is apparently, even if it was a planned home birth, landlords are not allowed to deny you of that because it's medical information.
Anyway, it's not important. Oh, and then my water still hadn't broke at this time.
She started explaining to you, okay, I'm going to break your water for you, and she started pulling out the hook and like disinfecting it.
Oh, was she already?
Yeah.
Oh, she was really close.
While she was disinfecting, suddenly we heard a big splash, and she's like, I think that was my water.
I was like, I either just peed a lot or it was my water. I'm like, I'm pretty sure it was my water. Like most of the time when people are like, it's not like the movies, like you don't have this big gush, but I had this big gush of like water when I looked down. I just like all of a sudden had a contraction and just like, I don't know if like this is a thing, but I just felt like I like kind of like pushed or like contract, or maybe that's just my water just all of a sudden bursted, but like it just like it was a huge like gush.
You said, I think my water broke. She said, if you think it did, it did.
So then at that point she was like, all right, go time, like baby can come out now. And then what'd she say about the toilet?
She was trying to convince you to give birth on the toilet because she says, and I quote, this is where I do my best work. You said, and I quote, I'm not having a baby where my boyfriend
I said we're Rylan poops, I think.
Yeah.
It was very much like targeted at you very specifically.
It was very much about me. Yeah, so apparently it is a good place to give birth. This midwife often does it and somehow catches the baby before they go into the toilet, but Emma was not in for that, so me and one of the midwives helped Emma to the bed.
Which they had like all these like medical pads out. Those things were so absorbent though.
They were too. Nothing went through them.
Yeah.
And they were pretty thin.
But initially they were like, okay, like let's use gravity to our advantage, like let's go on all fours. And I was like on all fours, but I could barely hold myself up. It was like probably closer to 1 at this point, 1 p.m. and I hadn't eaten anything all day, and I had dinner like really early the night before and hadn't eaten a lot, so I felt really shaky and I was really hot. So then Rylan was underneath me with his arms like trying to hold me, but I just remember him shaking and like falling falling.
I slightly wasn't tall enough, so I was like just on my tippy toes so I could try to hold her here. And yeah, my arms started shaking and then my legs started shaking because I was just that slight amount of tippy toes was enough to mess me up. But I was like, I have no room to complain. Like I'm pushing through this no matter what.
And then I was like, screw this.
Emma's like, are you struggling? I'm like, oh, I'm fine. She's like, you are very clearly struggling. No, like I can't complain, like you're going to be worse. And she's like, I'm just gonna lay on my back, like I can't hold myself up and you clearly can't hold me up. So yeah, you just ended up in like pretty much in the movies, like how you just kind of lay on your back.
What they call the worst position, but I was way too weak, I feel like, to hold myself any other way. Like I was like, this is what's happening. But side note, at some point when I was like in like really intense labor, I called Rylan's mom. I just called her screaming, how the did you do this 4 times? Because Rylan is one of 4 siblings, and she just like laughed at me. Maybe you texted her secretly when I was like in contractions or something. MIA for
I think she heard Emma might be in labor.
It was Mike, because then I called her and she was like, okay, so this is labor for sure. And then apparently she had me on speakerphone when she was in her living room, and then Rylan's dad had walked into the living room like mid hearing me scream through a contraction. So he was like, and he had no idea, so he was like, well, I guess Emma's in labor then. And then I just hung up randomly. I was like, nope, okay, bye, I'm done with this. and I just left her hanging for hours again until Avery was born. But this was a surprise like gender reveal also to everyone. Like we knew her gender, but we didn't tell anybody. Everyone was like extra on their toes because they didn't know. But yeah, anyways, started pushing. That didn't take that long. That was probably only like half hour, 40 minutes total.
Yeah.
Which sounds like a long time, but it wasn't in the moment. I would just like basically almost fall asleep between contractions. But at one point, the midwife like told me to like feel because like her head was there, and I don't know why I wasn't expecting anything because I just felt like this immense pressure in my pelvis, which obviously makes sense, but like I just felt like I was pooping because it like pushes like on your butt, so it makes it feel like you're pooping. But I like felt down there and I felt something like that wasn't me, and that was like the weirdest thing ever. Like that's when I was like, oh my god, there's like a baby there. And her head was so squishy. I remember that so clearly. I don't know why.
Really?
Yeah. But then the midwife was like, Rylan, this is like so magical. Do you want to take a look? And I remember you looked at me for permission, like, and I was like, don't even think about it.
I think the midwife was like, Rylan, you can take a look. And it was like, no, he can't.
Yeah. I was funny during labor. Oh yeah, and then I remember at one point they were like taking her heart rate while I was like mid contractions and like pushing and everything, and like her heart rate was kind of dropping, which is like a little bit alarming. So then the midwife was like, you need to get her out in this push or we're intervening. So then I was like, well, you're not intervening, so I guess I'm getting her out this last push. And then I did that. So she was born on June 30th, 2020 at 1:41 p.m. and she was 6 pounds and 13 ounces. If you remember, it only took us about 3.5 hours from the time we figured out I was in labor until the time that like Avery was born. But anyways, they flopped Avery on my chest. And do you want to describe how you described that, Rylan?
Yeah, it was like a fish, very slippery. Initially, they like, it felt like, I don't know, I think they placed her on Emma's chest, but she was so slippery. It seemed like they threw her. And I actually like jumped back for a second, but then she was sliding off of Emma, so I slid her back on. And then I was like, oh, that's like a lot of gunk. And Minna was like, oh, she pooped on ya. And so they
cleaned it up.
And then she pooped again. So
they put her in like this nice new, clean, brand new swaddle. We got her, obviously everything was brand new, so brand new swaddle. They like put that on her, and it was all warm from the dryer, and then she pooped on that too. And I was like, you gotta be kidding me, this kid already out to destroy things. Yeah, so she pooped twice on me, but like I've never cared less in my life about being covered in someone else's
Well, they
poop.
cleaned it up really quick.
If they left it there, I don't think I would have cared at all. But I remember you were crying because I was in so much pain because the last like push, the midwife was like, it felt like she was tearing Avery out of me, and I felt like I was gonna split in half, and I was like screaming at her like stop, and Rylan was like crying because I was like in so much pain.
Yeah, didn't you think it was like happy tears? And I was like, no, like that was one of the scariest things in my life. Yeah, you'll stop at like the top of your lungs. I've never heard you scream like that.
Yeah, I was done, and she was like, no, you're not. I'm like, yes, I am. But yeah, but then it turned into happy tears.
Yeah.
When Avery was there, she wasn't crying.
Yeah, she wasn't crying.
Apparently, I don't really remember this, but like
she wasn't crying.
I
You
just
were
remember
worried because of one of the medications you were on that she could have been born with breathing problems. She could have been born with fluid in her lungs.
Yeah.
So they picked her up and they said, 1 sec, we just gotta piss her off. And guess what? Like they just
she like took her head
her
and like had her upside down. I was like shaking
and
her a little
smacked
bit.
her on the back a couple times. Like, and then she started crying and she's like, all right, she's all good.
I was like so adamant on cutting the umbilical cord the whole time, but then when it came to it, I was like, I do not care. I'm way too tired. Rylan, you cut it. I'm like, I don't even think I can cut scissors right now. I'm like, I can't. So then Rylan cuts the umbilical cord.
It was tough to cut through. I don't know if the scissors were dull
It's
or
rubbery.
It was more than I expected, but yeah,
No,
it was like
it's rubbery. It's more than you expected.
it took a couple to get the first cut. And once you have the first cut, it's like slides right through.
But then I had to deliver the placenta. So they shoot me up, I think it's with Pitocin in my leg. You remember that Tupperware they helped themselves to in our kitchen? Yeah, well, I pushed out the placenta and that's what they put it in. So no more spaghetti containers for us. That was our go-to spaghetti containers. That was cool. And then she was like, do you wanna keep your placenta? No, thank you. And you can take the Tupperware you destroyed with it. But then at that point, I like went and had a shower. I remember being so shaky after birth. Like it was the craziest thing. I got stuck in the shower because the midwives are busy and Rylan was busy, so I took like a half an hour long shower and I was standing there
And you couldn't
waiting.
Yeah, you couldn't step over the thing.
I couldn't step over the thing and I was just waiting for someone to come get me. And I was also like bleeding everywhere. I'm like, I can't get out of the shower and just bleed everywhere after we've like had a successful non-bloody birth. Like I'm not gonna ruin it now.
Well, it's funny because I also just assumed, I was like, wow, she's really having a good time in that shower. Like I thought you you wanted to be in there that long. I was like, man, her newborn daughter is not as important to her as just being in a shower right now.
No, I wanted to see her so bad. Over the shower, like I don't think anyone heard me. You were holding Avery and I like missed the first like few moments you were holding her, which I was kind of sad about, but that's okay. I have a picture of it, it's really cute. They like wanted to make sure I breastfed her within her first hour. And I breastfed her, and then once I was breastfeeding her, they're like, okay, we're just gonna leave you guys like that, and we're actually gonna head out now because there's another kid being born that we need to tend to. The midwife said to me, if you plan on having a second kid, you should plan on having a second home birth because it will go by faster. There's like no way you're making it to the hospital.
Yeah, it was like as she walked out the door.
That was
like,
the last thing she said to me.
As she walks through the door, it was like one of those movies. She like looks back, she's like, you should plan for a home birth next time. It's gonna be faster. And then she just walked out.
So the midwives left. It was like 3:30. Avery was born at 1:41. So like within less than 2 hours, they were gone. I, for some reason, was so convinced. I don't know why I had it in my head. I was like, we're going to the hospital after everything is calm. So then when like they're packed up, they're like, okay, and bye, going to another home birth. And I was like,
yeah, I definitely thought we would go to the hospital. Afterwards, I realized like there wasn't, I guess, a reason why. As long
like
as
so many
everything
people,
was okay.
so many people do home births. Obviously, it makes sense. But I was like, I just like, because we've been thinking hospital for 9 months, we were both like, oh, obviously we're going to the hospital. And then they're just like, okay, yeah, you guys are just like good to chill at home, like you don't have to go to the hospital ever. I was like, but yeah, so the rest of the night we just spent worrying that she was alive. Every like 5 seconds we were going to check on her. She was sleeping in her bassinet, sound asleep, but we're like, oh my god, is she alive? Is she breathing? We just spent the rest of the evening, washed all our sheets and like deep cleaned the house for a few hours, and then called some family and was like, I called my sister, she didn't even know I was in labor. I called her and I was like, hey, surprise, you're an aunt now. And yeah, then we told everyone her gender. That is Avery Gale's birth story.
There was also randomly flowers in a card that showed up at our door that said, like, welcome your beautiful daughter to the world.
The midwife said that our neighbors had been sitting on the front porch waiting, and like every chance the midwife was running back and forth, they were sitting there waiting to like ask about if the baby was born yet. So the whole neighborhood probably heard me. That sums up our crazy birth story that happened within the span of like 6 hours.
I never messaged work. I just didn't show up for the rest of that day, and then what day of the week was it? Like
that was a Tuesday.
Was it Tuesday? Yeah, so I think Wednesday morning I messaged. So yeah, those back pains Emma was having yesterday, that was labor. I'll see you all next week.
This time last year I was like uber pregnant, and I feel like that was ages ago.
We wanted, we wanted to pack our hospital bag in January, or in November when we found out we were pregnant. We wanted to pack our hospital bag. We decided to pack it at least a week or two early.
10 days early, and she was born 9 days early, and there was no point in the hospital bag whatsoever.
So if you learned anything from this, don't pack a hospital bag.
I don't think that's what you...
Or push it off the last minute.
Or maybe have something to put your placenta in so that you don't ruin your spaghetti container. Anyways, if you made it this far, congratulations. I hope you found this story entertaining. I hope this, if you're pregnant right now, this doesn't scare you for childbirth.
Sorry if this video was a little long. The next birth story will inevitably be shorter.